A waitress heard screams coming from an old, empty warehouse basement. What she found chained up in the dark was the most dangerous gang leader on the whole West Side. And saving him, that would flip her entire world upside down. It started at 5:47 in the morning. Emma Clark was cutting through the back alley behind Morrison Street like she always did. She knew this shortcut really well. 3 years now, ever since she got her job at Ruby's Diner. The old cloth factory building stood on her right. Windows dark and empty like dead eyes. The fire escape stairs all rusty and broken. A leftover building from when Los Angeles made stuff in factories. Everyone just ignored it now, but nobody could ignore the screams. They were quiet and far away, but they cut through the early morning silence like a sharp knife. Emma stopped walking and pulled out one earbud. The music went silent as she listened hard. Nothing. Just the faraway rumble of cars on the highway. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe her brain was playing tricks after working 2 shifts yesterday and only sleeping 4 hours. She walked faster. She couldn't be late. Ruby had already given her 2 warnings this month. Once for slapping a customer who touched her without asking. Once for giving free food to a homeless mom with 2 little kids. One more mess up, and she'd be looking for a new job. And rent was due in 6 days. Her stomach twisted thinking about it. $73 in her bank account. Rent at $890. That left $417 for food, gas, phone, and the hospital bills from her mom's cancer treatment that she'd already put off 3 times. The scream came again, closer this time, clearer, a man's voice rough with pain. Then it stopped suddenly, like someone stuffed something in his mouth. Every instinct Emma had from growing up in the rough parts of the city screamed at her to keep walking. Don't get involved, don't be a witness, don't put yourself in danger. She learned that lesson when she was 12. She saw a drive by shooting and spent the next month terrified the shooters would find her, but her feet had stopped moving. Her hand was already pulling out her phone. Her thumb was hovering over 911. Then she heard more, another voice, cold and bossy. Then the wet, heavy sound of fists hitting skin. Then another cry, weaker this time, broken. God help me. Emma whispered into the empty alley, squeezing her eyes shut. This isn't my problem. This is definitely not my problem. She looked at her phone, 5:51. If she called the cops, they'd want her to give a statement. She'd be late for work. She might lose her job. And for what? Some guy getting beat up in an empty building. Probably gang stuff, probably drugs, not her problem. She should go. She should get to work, pour coffee, serve eggs, collect her tips, and forget this ever happened. Anyone smart would do exactly that, but Emma had never been as smart as she was stubborn. Her mom used to say she got her hero thing from Marcus, her older brother. She got his green eyes, too. He died 3 years ago pulling 2 kids from a burning car on the highway. He went back for a 3rd kid and the car exploded. Emma barely remembered their dad. He left when she was 4. But she remembered Marcus. He was the kind of person who ran toward danger instead of away from it. This is crazy, she said quietly, shoving her phone back in her pocket. Totally crazy, but her feet were already taking her toward the cut fence of the warehouse. The gap in the fence was just wide enough for Emma to squeeze through. The sharp metal edge scratched her arm, leaving a long cut. But she didn't notice. All her attention was on the pitch. Black building ahead. The cloth factory had been empty for a long time. Maybe 10 years, maybe longer. The broken windows looked like empty eye holes. The brick walls covered with stains and spray paint. Emma stepped inside through a ground floor window that someone had opened before. Darkness swallowed her immediately. The smell of wet mold hit her nose, mixed with something else, stronger, thicker, like rotting garbage or sewage. Emma almost threw up. She had to cover her nose with her sleeve to keep going. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. She swept the weak light across the huge space. Broken stuff everywhere. The ceiling had fallen down in some places. Rusty old machines lay around like dead metal monsters. Spray paint covered the walls with drawings and gang names and curse words. The screaming had gone quiet, but Emma knew it came from below. She could hear it clearly before, the the sound echoing up like from a basement. She moved slowly, trying not to make noise. Every step made broken glass crunch under her shoes. That noise rang through the empty space like an alarm. Emma's heart was pounding wildly, blood roaring in her ears. She found the stairs after about 2 minutes of feeling around in the dark. A metal door stood partly open. Behind it were concrete steps leading down into darkness. A dim light came up from below. Along with the sound of men talking, Emma turned off her phone light. Her heart was pounding so hard now she was scared the men down there could hear it. She went down 1 step at a time, her back pressed against the cold wall. Slow and careful, holding her breath. 12 steps. She counted each one to keep her mind focused, to stop herself from thinking about how crazy this was. The basement opened up in front of her like a bad dream. Light from a few work bulbs hanging from the ceiling fell on a scene that made Emma freeze. 4 men in black suits stood in a half-circle. They didn't look like street gang members. No obvious tattoos. No ripped jeans or hoodies. They looked like business people, like the kind of men you might see in meetings in fancy office buildings. Except for one small thing, the gun holster at each man's hip, and in the middle of them, a man was tied to a metal chair. His hands were chained behind him, his legs tied tight to the chair legs. Blood was everywhere, on his face, on his shirt that used to be white and was now stained red, dripping down onto the concrete floor in a small pool. This wasn't a gang fight. This wasn't a drug thing being settled. This was organized torture, cold and planned out. Emma wanted to run. Every cell in her body screamed that she had to run, had to turn back to the stairs, had to get out before anyone saw her. But her feet felt stuck to the floor, and then the man in the chair lifted his head. Through the blood and bruises, his eyes were still sharp, storm gray, like cold steel. Those eyes looked straight into the darkness where Emma stood. Straight at her, he had seen her. Emma didn't dare breathe. Those gray eyes stared straight at her, cutting through the darkness like the 10 meters between them didn't exist. She waited for the worst, for him to shout, to call the others over, to point into the shadowy corner where she stood. For 4 guns to swing toward her, but it didn't happen. The tied-up man looked at her for just a moment, and then he did something that shocked Emma. He looked away, slowly, on purpose. He turned his face to the side like he'd never seen her at all. And then, while the men in suits were busy talking to each other, he gave the tiniest shake of his head. A small movement almost impossible to see. But Emma understood right away. Go, leave, don't let them find you. He was protecting her. A man in chains, covered in blood, clearly about to die, was trying to protect a complete stranger. He didn't want to drag her into this. Emma should have listened. She knew this was her only chance to slip out without anyone knowing she'd been there. But instead of turning away, she watched. Her eyes had gotten used to the dim light now. She could see more clearly. He was maybe in his 30s, dangled face, square jaw, black hair stuck together with dried blood. Even like this, something about him still gave off power. Danger, like a wolf trapped in a cage, hurt but not broken. He was covered in injuries. His lips were swollen. His left eye bruised so badly it was almost shut. Blood running from a cut on his forehead down his cheek. His shirt was ripped open, showing bruises and cuts across his chest and stomach. His wrists were scraped raw, bleeding from fighting against the metal chains. Emma looked to the side, and her heart almost stopped. A metal table sat nearby, covered with things that made her stomach turn, pliers, knives, something that looked like a heated metal rod, and other tools she couldn't bring herself to look at closely. This wasn't a quick beating. This was torture. Planned out, prepared for, given time. How long had he suffered through it? Hours, all night. One of the men in the black suit stepped closer. He lit a cigarette and blew smoke into the tied man's face. He said something loud enough that Emma caught pieces of it. Your little brother said to wait until morning. He wants to be here when you die. Emma saw the man's shoulders get tight. Nathan's going to be real happy. Finally, Dante is finished. Dante, the name felt familiar. Emma had heard it somewhere. On the news, in whispered stories around the neighborhood, in her mother's warnings about people you didn't mess with, the Dante group, the biggest gang on the West Side, and this man in chains, was connected to them. But what grabbed Emma wasn't the name. It was how he reacted to the words little brother. Before that, even while being beaten, even with blood all over him, he'd held onto a strange calm. Like physical pain couldn't reach the place where he truly lived inside. But at those two words, something inside him fell apart. Emma saw it clearly. Those gray eyes, a moment ago sharp and watchful, went empty. His shoulders sagged. Not from being tired, but from a blow more brutal than any fist. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't know who the little brother was. She didn't know why those two words carried that kind of destroying force. But she recognized one thing. She was watching a man being destroyed from the inside, and it had nothing to do with the wounds on his body. Someone had betrayed him, someone close, someone he had trusted. Emma stood there with her back pressed to the cold wall. Her heart pounding out of control, and she knew she had to decide, right now, she could turn back to the stairs. Slip out, go to work like none of this ever happened. She could call the police from outside, give them the location, and disappear. She could do what any normal person would do, or she could do something crazy, something Marcus would have done. Emma looked at the man again. He didn't look back at her, still trying to pretend she didn't exist, still trying to protect her in the only way he could. And that, more than anything else, decided everything. This was the gang world. Emma knew it as clearly as day. These men killed as easily as breathing, and the man tied up in that chair probably wasn't innocent either. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what he had done. She didn't know if he deserved saving. Maybe he was worse than the ones hurting him. Maybe he was a killer, a drug dealer, or something darker. She should leave. She had to leave. This wasn't her fight. Not her world. Not her problem. But then she thought of Marcus. Her brother had never asked if the kids in that burning car deserved to be saved. He hadn't stopped to think about whether they were good people's children. He had only seen someone who needed help, and he ran toward it. He died because of that, but he also lived because of it. And Emma, no matter how hard she wanted to deny it, carried that same reckless blood. She looked down at her hand. Her phone was still in her palm, the screen black. A crazy idea formed in her mind, crazy enough to get her killed. But maybe the only way. She studied the 4 men. 3 of them stood close together, smoking and talking. The 4th one, the youngest, maybe only about 20, stood guard near the chair where the tied man sat. If she could draw the 3 away, leaving only one, she might have a chance, a tiny chance, but still a chance. Emma backed up a few steps, finding a spot deeper in the shadows. Her hand shook as she unlocked the phone, found a song, and turned the volume all the way up. Then she threw it. The phone sailed through the air and hit a far corner of the basement with a loud crash. And immediately the music exploded, echoing through the concrete space. The 3 men reacted right away. Guns came out, and they rushed toward the sound, shouting to each other. The young ones started to follow, but one of the 3 barked at him, telling him to stay and watch the prisoner. He stopped, annoyed, but obeyed. Perfect. Emma moved like a shadow. She had picked up a metal bar from the broken stuff upstairs. About 1/2 meter long, heavy enough to hurt someone, the guard had his back to her, focused on the noise in the distance. Tense and distracted, she came up behind him, her steps light as air. 3 meters, 2, 1, she swung the bar. The sound of metal hitting skull was horrible. The guard dropped like a sack. He didn't even make a sound. Emma didn't stop to see if he was alive. She ran to the chair and dropped to her knees beside the tied man. For the first time, they were this close, and she could see every wound, every bruise, every mark from long torture. A key. She needed a key for the chains. She searched the guard's pockets and found a small ring of keys. Her hands shook so badly, she dropped them onto the concrete with a sharp clink. Breathe. The man's voice was broken by pain, but strangely steady. You can do it. Emma grabbed the keys and tried the first one. no, the second, no, the third, the lock snapped open. She freed his hands first, then his legs, her fingers trembling but never stopping. "Who are you?" he asked, rolling his scraped wrists, trying to bring feeling back. "The one saving your life," Emma said, her voice tight. "Now shut up." The man looked at her. Even with swollen lips, even with blood on his face, the corner of his mouth lifted just a little. "Bossy." Emma didn't have time to react to that comment because right then, she heard it. Footsteps, shouting. The three men were coming back. There was no time to think. Emma slipped her arm under the man's shoulder and tried to pull him up. He was heavier than she expected, and the moment his feet hit the ground, he almost fell. His legs, she realized with a shock of horror, had been hurt badly. His knees were swollen, his ankles bruised, maybe even broken bones. "Can you walk?" she asked, her voice urgent. "No other choice," he answered through clenched teeth. Emma didn't argue. She pulled his arm over her shoulder so he could put some of his weight on her, and they started moving. Every step for him was pain. She could feel his body go stiff with pain, could hear the choked breaths he fought to keep quiet. But he didn't stop, didn't complain, just ground his teeth and kept going. They had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a gunshot cracked through the air. The first bullet slammed into the concrete wall, right beside Emma's head, spraying tiny pieces like rain. A short scream tore out of her before she could stop it, but her feet never stopped, up the stairs. One step at a time, the man was heavy as lead, every step a fight against gravity, another shot, then another. Footsteps pounding behind them, angry shouting. They burst through the metal door, ran across the ruined ground floor, and headed for the window Emma had climbed through. Morning light hit her eyes like a shock, blinding and beautiful. She had never seen sunlight so beautiful, never known the pale blue sky of early morning could feel so precious, but they weren't safe. The running footsteps were still behind them. "Closer, closer, follow me," Emma said, pulling the man toward the alley to the right. "Don't ask." She knew this area like the back of her hand. 3 years walking to work through these alleys. 3 years remembering every corner, every shortcut, every place you could hide. She led him left into a passage so narrow they had to turn sideways, then through a hole in a fence, across the back lot of a laundromat that had shut down, then right again into another alley. Every step was pain for him, but he didn't slow down, didn't drag her down. He clenched his jaw and stayed with her. Finally, after twisting through at least 5 alleys, Emma pulled him into a dark spot between 2 large trash bins behind a Chinese restaurant that hadn't opened yet. They pressed close to the wall, trying to make themselves small in the shadow. Emma could hear footsteps racing past in the main alley, voices calling to each other, then fading, until there was only the sound of their breathing. Silence stretched out. Emma's chest rose and fell fast. Her heart hammering like it, wanted to burst through her ribs. She and the man stood so close she could feel the heat coming off him, could smell blood and sweat. He looked at her for the first time. He truly looked at her, not through darkness, not in the panic of running. Those gray eyes swept over her face like he was trying to remember every detail. "Why did you save me?" He asked, his voice still rough, but now carrying something else. Curiosity, disbelief. Emma swallowed. "Because you were screaming for help, and no one else came." He stared at her like she had said something completely crazy. "Do you know who I am?" "Not yet, but I figure you aren't a good man." A pause, then he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "I'm Liam Dante, the head of the Dante group." Emma felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. Dante, the most powerful gang boss on the West Side. She had saved the gang boss. She was standing in a dark alley with the gang boss. She went silent for a long moment, then looked down at him, and "You're bleeding all over the place." That was when she saw it. Blood was soaking through his shirt. More than before, faster than before. A wound in his stomach she hadn't been able to see in the dark was leaking without stopping. Turning the front of his shirt red, Liam was looking at her, but his focus was starting to slip. He was going down. The hospital wasn't an option. Emma knew that even before Liam whispered it out. The people hunting him would check every hospital, every clinic in the city. Taking him, there would be the same as signing a death sentence for both of them. So she did the only thing she could think of. She brought him home. Emma's apartment was on the 4th floor of an old building with no elevator. 4 flights of worn concrete stairs with rusty metal railings and flickering lights that looked like they were about to die. Normally, Emma climbed them in a few minutes. Today, with Liam half unconscious against her shoulder, it felt like an endless trip. He tried, she had to give him that, even with his legs badly hurt, even with blood still coming from the wound in his stomach. He forced himself to put one foot after the other, but the higher they went, the weaker he became. By the 3rd floor, Emma was almost dragging him. By the 4th, he was barely aware of anything. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, pushed it open with her shoulder, and pulled him inside. Emma's apartment was really small. One single room that was both living room and bedroom. A tiny kitchen corner. A bathroom just big enough to turn around in. The furniture was old, bought from thrift shops or picked up off the street. The walls were spotted with damp stains. A crack ran across the ceiling like a scar, but it was clean. That was the thing Emma always took pride in. No matter how poor she was, she kept this place neat and organized. The floors were mopped every week. Dishes were never left overnight. Clothes were always folded and put away in the closet. She might be broke, but she had dignity. Emma lowered Liam onto her beat-up sofa, the only sofa she owned. He lay there with his eyes squeezed shut, his chest rising and falling in heavy pulls. She stared at him for a second, then rushed to find the first aid kit. Marcus's first aid kit. Her brother had always prepared for everything, and when he died, Emma kept the kit as something to remember him by. She had never thought she would actually use it, definitely not to save a gang boss in her own living room. Her hands shook as she opened it and pulled out gauze, cleaning stuff, scissors. She cut away Liam's shirt, showing the wound in his stomach. A stab wound. Not too deep, but still bleeding. She bit her lip and started to clean it. "I'm not a doctor," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to him or to herself. "I know." Liam's voice made her jump. He had opened his eyes and was watching her. Those gray eyes dulled by pain. "But you're saving my life." For the second time, Emma didn't answer. She just kept working. She pressed gauze to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Liam didn't groan, didn't flinch. He just lay there and took it, watching her hands move. A knock at the door made them both go still. Emma looked up, panic rushing in. Who would come at this time, had they been found, so soon? A hand closed around her wrist. Liam, even weak, still had enough strength to squeeze lightly. "Calm down," he said, his voice low and steady. "Check who it is." Emma took a deep breath, stood up and went to the door. She looked through the peephole and let out a shaky breath of relief. Mrs. Chen, the 65-year-old landlord, a widow who lived on the floor below. Emma opened the door a crack. "Mrs. Chen, is something wrong? I heard strange noises," the older woman said, trying to look past Emma's shoulder. "Are you all right? I'm fine. It's just..." Emma swallowed. "My boyfriend had a motorcycle accident. I'm bandaging him up." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then looked through the gap. From that angle, she could see Liam on the sofa, covered in blood, his shirt torn to pieces, silence stretched out. Emma prepared for the worst, but Mrs. Chen only nodded slowly. "Be careful, girl," she said, gentle voice, eyes sharp with something unspoken. "Don't open your door to strangers." Then she turned away, asked nothing more. Didn't call the police. Didn't make a scene. Emma shut the door and leaned her back against it, her heart still racing. When she turned around, Liam was trying to sit up. "Do you have a phone?" he asked. "I need to call my people." Emma hesitated for a second, then handed him her phone. She was in this deep already. What difference did it make now? Liam dialed a number, a string of numbers he clearly knew by heart. The line rang twice before someone picked up. "Boss." The man's voice on the other end was full of sadness and relief. I thought you were I'm alive. Liam cut him off, his voice weak but still heavy with power. Victor, come now. I'll send the address. Victor Reed arrived within 20 minutes. Emma heard the knock and nearly jumped out of her skin. But Liam only nodded, telling her to open the door. The man who stepped inside was huge, nearly 6 feet, 3 inches tall. Shoulders as wide as a doorway, standing like a former soldier or professional bodyguard, 42 years old. Hair cut short and mixed with gray, an angled face with a faint scar running along his temple. But what caught Emma's attention wasn't how scary he looked. It was the look on his face when he saw Liam, worry, relief, and something that looked like tears rising at the corners of his eyes. "Boss," Victor said, his voice catching, "I've been looking for you everywhere, all night, I thought." He didn't finish. He just moved quickly to Liam and dropped to one knee beside the sofa. His rough hands shook as they touched the younger man's shoulder, like he needed to make sure Liam was really alive. "I'm fine, Victor," Liam said. Even though his voice was so weak, the words sounded like a lie. "Let me see." Victor didn't wait for permission. He gently lifted the gauze Emma had pressed over the wound and looked at it with the eyes of someone who knew what he was looking at. His face got dark. "This stab isn't very deep, but you've lost a lot of blood." And he pressed lightly at a few spots on Liam's stomach, making Liam grit his teeth. "Internal bleeding. You need emergency surgery. No hospital," Liam said at once. "Of course not. We have a safe place." "Our doctor is waiting, but we need to go now." Victor stood up, and for the first time he really looked at Emma. His sharp eyes swept over her from head to toe, measuring, analyzing. "Who saved the boss?" he asked, his voice openly suspicious. "She did," Liam answered before Emma could open her mouth. "Alone." Victor blinked like he didn't understand what he just heard. He looked at Liam, then at Emma, then back at Liam. "Alone. She alone broke into Nathan's place. Took down 4 armed men and dragged you out?" "Yes." Silence stretched out. Victor stared at Emma with a completely different look now, no longer suspicious, but pure shock, like she had grown a second head. Emma stood there, not knowing what to say. She was still in her waitress uniform, still had Liam's blood on her hands and on her clothes, and she still couldn't fully believe that what happened over the last few hours was real. "What happened?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Who did this to him?" Victor looked at Liam, a silent question. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. "She deserves to know." Victor took a deep breath, like what he was about to say hurt even to think about. "Nathan," he said, "the boss's younger brother." Emma remembered the piece she had heard in the basement. "Your little brother said to wait until morning." Now the pieces began to lock together, forming a picture darker than she had imagined. "Nathan has been secretly working with Jack Turner, the leader of the group fighting against us, for 6 months. Victor continued, his voice heavy. The old man, the father of the boss and Nathan, always favored Liam. He left everything to the oldest son, power, territory, all of it. Nathan lived 2 years in his brother's shadow. He stopped and looked at Liam lying still, eyes shut. "I've suspected for a long time, small signs, things that didn't add up. But there was no hard proof, and the boss." Victor shook his head. He wouldn't believe it. Nathan is the only person left in this world that he trusted completely. The only family he had left. Emma looked at Liam, and now she understood that moment in the basement when he heard the words "little brother." The moment she had watched him fall apart from the inside. It hadn't been from physical pain. It was because he had just found out the only person he trusted, the person he had surely loved and protected his whole life, had stabbed him in the back. That pain, Emma understood, was more brutal than any wound on his body. Turner promised to split the territory with Nathan if Liam died. Victor went on. "Last night, Nathan tricked the boss into a meeting, said it was to talk business. It was a trap. Turner's men were already waiting, and he meant to kill his own brother," Emma whispered, not as a question but as a horrified statement. "Kill, but not quickly," Victor replied, bitterness in his voice. "Turner wanted information. wanted every secret in the organization. And Nathan wanted to watch his brother suffer. The room sank into heavy silence. Emma looked at Liam, the man still lying there with his eyes shut. But she could see his jaw clenched tight, could see a pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds eating at him from the inside. She wanted to say something, but there were no words that could be enough. What could you say to a man who had just been betrayed by his own brother? "There's one more thing," Victor said, and his tone made the hair rise on Emma's arms. He looked at her, his gaze serious. "Those 4 men in the basement, they saw your face." Emma felt her blood slow. Meaning Turner will find you. "It's only a matter of time, and when he does," Victor paused, "you will die." Victor's words hit Emma like a bucket of ice water thrown straight in her face. "You will die." The sentence kept looping in her head like a nightmare song. She had only wanted to help someone who was crying out for help. And now she was being pulled into a war between gang groups, her life hanging by the thinnest thread. "She has to come with us," Victor said, his tone not a suggestion, but almost an order, "at least until we handle this." Emma shook her head and backed up a step, like physical distance could save her from the reality closing in. "I have a job, I have a life. I can't just disappear like that. You don't have any life left if Turner finds you." Victor said flatly, "He's not the forgiving type. You saved his enemy. You ruined his plan. He will find you and he will kill you. Not quickly, not easily. Turner likes people to hurt before they die." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to say she was nobody, just a nobody waitress, that no one cared enough to hunt her down, but she had seen that basement. She had seen the tools on that table. She had seen what they did to Liam. She knew Victor wasn't lying. "I'm not forcing you." Liam's voice came from the sofa, weak, but still carrying a strange steadiness. He had opened his eyes and was looking at her, those gray eyes tired but honest. "It's your decision, Emma." "But I owe you my life. Let me protect you, at least until it's safe." He paused and drew a breath that clearly hurt. "After that, I'll pay you whatever you want. Money, a new apartment, wiping out your debt, anything." Emma stood there in the middle of her tiny apartment and looked around, the stained walls, the beat-up furniture, the refrigerator humming because it was too old, the leaking faucet she couldn't afford to fix, $73 in her account, $47,000 in hospital debt, a minimum wage job she might have already lost after this morning. This was the life she was protecting. Was this what she was willing to die to keep? She thought of what she had just lived through. Blood, guns, violence. The gang world was a world of darkness, a place a girl like her didn't belong. But she also thought of Turner, of the men who would come for her if she stayed here. She had no money to run, nowhere to go, no one to call. 1 week, she said at last, her voice shaking but firm. "I'll go with you for 1 week. Then I go back to my life." Liam watched her for a long moment, then nodded. 1 week. Emma turned away and stepped into the room to pack. It didn't take long because she hardly owned anything worth carrying. A few old clothes, toiletries, a little cash hidden in a cookie tin. She stuffed it all into an old backpack, then stopped in front of the small shelf beside the bed. A photograph in a wooden frame. Marcus, smiling bright, one arm thrown around her shoulders on his last birthday. She lifted the picture, held it to her chest for a second, then carefully slid it into the backpack. Someone important. She turned and saw Liam watching her from the sofa, gray eyes following every movement. "My brother," she answered, her voice as soft as breath. "He's gone." Liam didn't ask anything else. He didn't ask how he died. Didn't ask how long it had been. Didn't offer empty comfort. He only nodded, a small gesture full of understanding. He understood the pain of losing family. Now more than ever he understood. Victor helped Liam to his feet, and they started toward the door. Emma slung the backpack over her shoulder and looked back at the apartment one last time. This place was shabby, cramped, full of problems. But it was her home, and she didn't know if she would ever come back to it. They stepped into the hallway, and Mrs. Chen was standing there by the door of her own apartment on the floor below. The older woman looked at them. At Liam being held up by Victor, at Emma with the backpack on her shoulder. She didn't ask anything. Not one word. She only nodded, a gentle, knowing nod, like she had seen too much in her life to be surprised by anything anymore. "Be careful, girl," she said, repeating exactly what she had said before. Then she turned away and closed her door, leaving them with the hallway shadows and the uncertain future ahead. The black SUV took them to a fancy hotel in the downtown area, the kind of place Emma had only ever seen in magazines or on TV. They didn't go through the main entrance. They went in through a private entrance at the back, where there were no security cameras, and no one asked questions. The elevator took them straight to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Emma had to fight not to stare with her mouth open. The suite was bigger than her apartment. No, much bigger. A huge living room with cream, colored leather sofas, a marble coffee table and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over all of Los Angeles. There was a private kitchen, a dining room, and at least 3 doors leading to other rooms she didn't dare guess at. Everything was fancy, refined, and completely foreign to her world. A medical team was already waiting. 2 nurses and a doctor, all dressed professionally, and none of them asked a single question about injuries that were obviously from torture. They took Liam into one of the bedrooms that had been turned into a temporary operating room with bright lights, medical equipment, and everything they needed. The door closed and Emma was left outside with Victor and the waiting. 3 hours that felt endless. Emma couldn't sit still. She paced the living room from one window to another, from one sofa to the next. She didn't know why she was this worried. She had met Liam Dante only hours ago, and he was a gang boss, a criminal, a dangerous man. She shouldn't care whether he lived or died, but she did, and that scared her more than being hunted by Turner. Victor brought her a cup of coffee and sat down beside her on the sofa. Silence stretched for a while before he spoke. "I've been with the boss for 16 years, since he was 20, since he took over the group from his father." Emma looked at him, not sure why he was telling her this. "He's not as bad as the newspapers say." Victor went on, his voice low and unhurried. "He has rules, no human trafficking. He doesn't touch kids or innocent people. He doesn't do business with men who sell drugs to school kids. In our world, that's already different. That's already something you can respect." He paused and looked toward the closed door where Liam was being operated on. "In 16 years, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." Emma nearly spilled her coffee. "He met me only hours ago. Sometimes a few hours are enough," Victor replied, one corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Sometimes a single moment is enough to know someone is special." Emma didn't know how to answer, so she stayed quiet, staring down into the coffee in her hands. After a while, something came back to her. Work, Ruby. She hadn't shown up this morning, hadn't called, hadn't explained anything. She pulled out her phone. The phone Victor had given back to her after taking it from the guard's pocket in the basement. "And call the diner." Ruby picked up on the second ring. "Ruby's Diner. Ruby, it's Emma. I'm sorry about this morning. There was an emergency in my family and I. You're 4 hours late." Ruby cut in, her voice cold as ice. 4 hours, Emma, not a call, not a text. How many times have I warned you? I know, but this was an emergency. I don't want to hear it. Ruby said, "Don't come back." The line went dead. Emma stared at the phone screen, the final beep still ringing in her ear. She had just lost her job, her only income, the one thing keeping her from falling into total poverty. She sank onto the sofa, numb, staring out the window without really seeing anything. She didn't tell Victor. There was no point. She just sat there holding her silent pain and waited. After 3 hours, the operating room door opened. The doctor stepped out, pulling off his gloves, looking tired but calm. The surgery was successful. He said, "We handled the internal bleeding. Some of the other injuries were stitched and bandaged properly as well." Emma let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her chest went light, like a heavy stone had just been lifted away. "But he lost a great deal of blood. The doctor continued. He needs to be watched for at least 48 hours to make sure there are no problems. He needs complete rest. Victor nodded and gripped the doctor's hand in thanks. Emma just stood there staring toward the half-open door, wondering why she felt so relieved to know that a gang boss was still alive. Victor let Emma see Liam around 5 in the afternoon, after the doctor confirmed his condition had stabilized. She stepped into the bedroom that had been turned into a temporary hospital room, and the stillness closed over her at once. The heart monitor kept a steady rhythm, a soft beeping like the pulse of time itself. Late afternoon sunlight slid through the curtains, laying pale gold bands across the shiny wood floor. Liam lay on the large bed, his skin so washed out it looked almost see-through under the gentle light. The white blank, it was pulled up to his chest, showing bandages wrapped around his shoulder and arm. He looked weak, fragile, nothing like the image of a powerful gang boss the name Dante was supposed to bring up. But he was alive. Emma dragged a chair to the bedside, sat down and waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for. Maybe for him to wake. Maybe for a sign that she should leave. Maybe simply because she didn't know what else to do. Minutes passed, the sunlight shifted across the floor, the machines kept their steady beat, and then Liam opened his eyes. Those gray eyes took a moment to focus, scanning the room like he had to piece together where he was. Then they settled on Emma, and a faint smile touched his mouth. The first smile she had seen from him that wasn't buried under blood or pain. "You're still here," he said, his voice small and weak. "I said 1 week," Emma answered, trying to keep her tone calm, even though her heart was beating faster than normal. "It hasn't even been a full day yet. What, do you think I'm the kind of person who breaks her word?" Liam gave a soft chuckle, then winced with pain. "No, I think you're the kind of person who runs into a basement full of men with guns to save a stranger." They fell quiet for a while. Liam watched her, those gray eyes seeming to read every thought in her head. "What did you lose by saving me?" he asked suddenly. Emma almost lied, almost said nothing, almost said she was fine, almost said not to worry. But looking into those eyes she couldn't. "My job," she said, softer than she meant to. "I got fired." Liam closed his eyes and let out a heavy breath. His face tightened with something that wasn't physical pain. "I'll make it right," he said. I know you don't need it." Liam cut in, opening his eyes to look at her. "I know you didn't do this for money, or for anything I could give you. That's why I want to do it, because I want to, not because you need it." Silence again. Liam reached out, slow and careful, fighting pain until his hand found hers. His fingers curled around her fingers and squeezed lightly. "Stay here with me," he whispered, his eyes already starting to close from being tired, "just for a little while." Emma didn't pull her hand away. She looked at their hands together, his rough hand with hard spots and scars. Her smaller hand with rough spots from carrying plates. 2 hands from 2 completely different worlds. Liam slipped back into sleep, his breathing turning even and soft. But his hand still held hers, like he was afraid she would disappear if he let go. Emma sat there watching him sleep and let her thoughts flood in. This morning, she had been an ordinary diner waitress worried about rent and work shifts. Now she was sitting in a fancy hotel, suite, holding the hand of a gang boss who had almost died, with no job, no safety, nothing left but a weak promise and a future that was completely uncertain. She should have been terrified. She should have regretted it. She should have wished she had kept walking to work this morning instead of stopping when she heard the screams. But strangely, she felt none of those things. Looking at Liam's face in sleep, peaceful and weak, she couldn't find regret anywhere inside herself. Maybe she was crazy. Maybe she had completely lost her mind. But if she could go back to this morning, she knew she would still do the same thing. The light faded, shifting from gold to orange and then to purple. Darkness crept into the room, but Emma didn't turn on the lamp. She just sat there in the thinning light, her hand still in Liam's until the sky beyond the window turned completely black. Emma couldn't sleep. Victor had arranged a private room for her in the suite with a king-sized bed dressed in clean white sheets and a soft comforter. She should have slept like the dead after a day like this, but instead she lay twisting, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet. She was used to street noise leaking through thin windows. Neighbors arguing at midnight, ambulance sirens, bass thumping from a car rolling past. The perfect silence of this high and suite felt unbearable. Finally, around 2 in the morning, she gave up on trying to sleep. She got out of bed, pulled a thin sweater around her shoulders, and walked into the living room. She didn't expect to find anyone there, but Liam was sitting in the armchair by the window, looking out over the city spread beneath him. He had changed into clean clothes, a black shirt left partly unbuttoned to show bandages across his chest. And though he was still pale, he looked better than he had that afternoon. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Emma said, coming closer. "You shouldn't be up this late," Liam replied without turning around, "but here we both are." Emma didn't argue. She sat in the chair across from him, pulled her legs up, and looked out the window with him. Los Angeles at night was a sea of glittering lights stretching to the horizon, beautiful enough to make it hard to believe how much crime lived under that glow. "How much pain, how many broken lives. Tell me about you," Liam said suddenly, "about your life before you met me." Emma went quiet for a moment, thinking about it. She wasn't used to sharing, wasn't used to opening up. But something about the darkness, the stillness, the gray eyes watching her with real interest, made her want to speak. "My mother died of cancer," she began, her voice as light as breath. "When I was 19, I dropped out of school to take care of her." She paused and swallowed. She was in the hospital for 8 months. Chemo, radiation, everything they could try. It still didn't save her, and when she was gone, she left me with $47,000 of debt. "I'm still paying it off. What about your father?" Liam asked gently. "He left when I was 4, never came back." Emma shrugged like it didn't matter, even though she knew it mattered more than she wanted to admit. "I don't remember his face. I just remember my mother crying for so many nights after he left, and Marcus." Emma felt her chest tighten at the name. "He was the only one I had left. After my father walked out, after my mother died, he was everything I had." She looked down at her hands, and then he was gone too. "I'm used to being left behind, but I never get used to it." Silence stretched out, then Liam spoke, his voice low and distant. "My father was the boss before me. A ruthless man. He taught me with a whip and with blood, with lessons I paid for in my own skin. He stared out the window, his eyes clouded with memory. He told me when I was little, in this world, trusting anyone is how you die. I thought he was wrong. Turns out he was right. What about your mother? She died when I was 5. I don't remember her face." Liam let out a quiet breath. "I only remember the smell of jasmine. She used to put jasmine in her hair. Sometimes I still look for that smell in gardens, in flower shops. Like if I find it, I'll find her again." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy. "Nathan, I thought I was protecting him. For 32 years, I did everything so he'd be safe, sheltered, loved. Turns out he hated me for those same 32 years, and I never knew." Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the silence of 2 people who had put down their armor, letting the wounds underneath show. "You're the first person," Liam said, turning to look at Emma, "to save me and want nothing. Not money, not power, not benefit." Just because I was crying out, Emma looked at him and a small smile found her mouth. "You're the first person I've saved when I wasn't sure I should." They held each other's eyes for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, they both laughed, not loudly. Just soft, tired laughter, but real. It was the first time either of them had laughed since they met. And that sound in the darkness of the suite at 2 in the morning felt like a promise of something she didn't dare name. They sat there, saying nothing more, watching the city lights flicker below. The sky slowly shifted from black to gray, then to pale pink as dawn began to show. And through all of it, the silence between them was no longer cold or distant. It was warm, easy, like the silence between people who understood each other without needing words. On the morning of the third day, Emma woke with sunlight pouring through the curtains and realized she had fallen asleep in the armchair by the window. Liam was no longer there. She stood, stretched, and went looking for him. She found him in the office, a room she had never stepped into before. And she found a completely different Liam. He was standing beside the desk, phone pressed to his ear. His back straight as steel, even though he was surely still in pain. His voice filled the room, cold and sharp as a blade. Nathan and Turner are panicking. Good. I want them panicking. Victor stood nearby, nodding at each command. I want a list of everyone who is with Nathan. Everyone, not one name missing. The ones loyal to him will be given a choice. Come back to me or face the consequences. He paused to listen to whatever the person on the other end said, then continued, his tone even colder. My brother wanted me dead. He chose his path. Now I'll show him the consequences of that choice. Emma stood outside the doorway, frozen. This wasn't the Liam she had sat with last night, the man who had spoken about his mother's jasmine smell and the pain of betrayal. This was the Dante boss, the ruler of the largest criminal group on the West Side, and the sound of his voice made her shiver. She was about to step back when Liam turned his head, gray eyes catching her in the doorway. He ended the call, set the phone down, and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. How much did you hear? He asked. Enough, Emma said, forcing calm into her voice even as her heart raced. Silence stretched out. Liam walked toward her, slow and steady, and Emma had to fight the urge to back away. Are you afraid of me? He asked, stopping a few steps away. Emma thought about that question. She should be afraid. She had just heard him ordering a hunt for traitors. Had heard the cruelty in his tone. She knew who he was, knew what he had done in his life. I don't know, she answered honestly. Liam studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. You should be afraid. But his eyes said something else. Those eyes were not as cold as his voice, not as cruel as his orders. They looked at her with something almost begging, like he was asking her to see both parts of him and not run. That afternoon, Emma sat in the living room trying to read a book she had pulled from the shelf. She couldn't focus. The words danced in front of her, and her mind kept going back to Liam, to the two completely different men that seemed to live in the same body. She heard footsteps and looked up. Liam was walking toward her, his walk still a little stiff from his injuries, but far steadier than before. He sat beside her on the sofa, closer than he needed to be. You're beautiful when you're concentrating, he said, his voice nothing like it had been that morning, gentle and warm. Emma looked up and frowned. Don't flirt with me, I'm telling the truth, Liam replied, one corner of his mouth lifting. Would you rather I lie? Emma didn't know how to answer. She turned back to the book, but she could feel his eyes still on her, could feel the heat of him sitting too close. The space between them shifted, becoming heavy, charged. Emma, the way he said her name made her look up. Liam was watching her with those deep gray eyes, and his hand reached out and touched her hand lightly. I don't know who you are, Emma Clark, a waitress brave to the point of crazy. Someone who ran into hell to save a stranger. I don't understand you, but I want to. I want to know you. Emma knew she should pull her hand away. Every piece of sense in her head was screaming that this was insane, that he was a gang boss, that she was sinking into something more dangerous than the guns in that basement. But she didn't pull away. They held each other's eyes, and the distance between them seemed to close without either of them moving. Liam leaned in toward her, slow, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. Emma didn't. Her heart pounded wildly, her breathing turning shallow and fast. She could feel his breath on her lips, could see every detail of his face. The faint scar along his jaw, the curve of his mouth, the gray eyes looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Their lips were almost touching. A knock at the door cracked through the moment like lightning. They sprang apart at once. Victor stepped in, his expression so serious that Emma knew immediately something was wrong. Victor didn't wait to be invited. He stepped into the room with focus so sharp Emma could feel the air thicken. "Turner knows the boss is alive," he said immediately, no introduction, and they found her apartment. Emma felt the blood in her body turn the wrong way. Her apartment, the place she had lived for 3 years, the only place she had ever called home. How do they know? Liam asked, his voice already shifting into cold focus. They've been questioning people all over the area around the warehouse. Someone remembers seeing a girl helping an injured man through the alleys that morning. They followed the trail. Victor turned to Emma. "2 men came to your apartment this afternoon. They asked Mrs. Chen about the brown-haired girl on the 4th floor. Emma's heart seemed to stop. Mrs. Chen, the kind older woman who hadn't asked questions when Emma dragged a blood-covered man up the stairs, who had only nodded and warned her to be careful. "What did she say?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "She said she didn't know where you went. Said you were just a tenant, and she didn't concern herself with your business." Victor paused. "She protected you." Emma closed her eyes, guilt and gratitude mixing into one heavy weight in her chest. Mrs. Chen had lied for her. She had faced Turner's men. She had put herself in danger for a tenant she only knew from brief hallway greetings. "Is Mrs. Chen all right?" Emma asked. "For now she's fine." Victor said, "They don't mess with the elderly." "But Turner knows someone helped the boss escape. They're hunting all over the city." Emma knew what that meant. If Turner found her, Mrs. Chen would be in danger too. That innocent older woman would be dragged into this simply for staying quiet, simply for being kind. It was all Emma's fault. "I will protect you, Emma." Liam's voice pulled her out of the spiral. She looked up, meeting those gray eyes fixed on her with a strange certainty. "Can you promise that?" she asked, her voice smaller than she wanted. "Can you promise I'll be safe? That Mrs. Chen will be safe? That no one else will get hurt because of me?" Liam held her eyes for a long time, and she could see him weighing the answer. He could have lied. He could have said what she wanted to hear. But he didn't know, he said, his voice low and honest. "I can't promise that. In my world, nothing is certain." He stepped closer and set his hand on her shoulder. "But I can promise I'll try with everything I have. I'll use every resource I have to protect you. And if I fail..." He paused, gray eyes burning as he looked into hers. "If I fail, I'll die before you do." Emma didn't know what to say. She only looked at him, at the truth in his eyes, and nodded. Victor spoke, breaking the moment. "We need to move. This hotel isn't safe anymore. I've prepared an estate outside the city, far from downtown, heavily guarded. We should leave tonight." Liam nodded. "Get the car ready." An hour later, they were in the familiar black SUV, gliding through the emptier roads of Los Angeles at night. Emma sat beside Liam in the back seat, watching the streetlights slide past the windows like blurred streaks. "I have to end this," Liam said suddenly, his voice low and far away. "Face Nathan. End everything once and for all." "Your brother?" Emma started, then stopped, not knowing what to say. "He's not my brother anymore," Liam replied, his voice hard as stone. But Emma could hear the break underneath. "The brother I loved died a long time ago. Maybe he never existed. All that's left is an enemy who wants me dead." Emma said nothing. She only reached out and took his hand in the darkness of the cabin. Liam looked down at their fingers together, then looked at her with eyes full of feelings that had no name. He didn't speak, but he tightened his hold on her hand, like it were the only lifeline in the storm rushing toward them. The estate sat out in the Los Angeles suburbs, nearly an hour's drive from downtown. It was a huge piece of architecture with high walls around the grounds, security cameras at every corner, and men in suits walking around without stopping. Inside, everything was so fancy Emma felt like she had stepped into another world. Her room was bigger than her old apartment, with a king-sized bed, a private bathroom with a marble tub, and a balcony that looked out over a huge garden. But no matter how beautiful it was, no matter how comfortable, Emma still felt like a bird trapped in a fancy cage. She couldn't go outside without someone with her, couldn't contact anyone except Liam and Victor, couldn't do anything but wait. The fourth day passed under choking tension. Liam spent the entire day in a meeting room with Victor and other men Emma didn't know, planning for a face with Nathan. The next morning, she caught pieces through a door that didn't quite close. A neutral location. How many guards each side would bring. Backup plans. It all sounded like they were preparing for a battle, not a meeting between two brothers. That evening, Emma accidentally overheard a conversation between Liam and Victor in the hallway. "This could be a trap, boss," Victor said, worry heavy in his voice. "Nathan knows you won't refuse the chance to talk to him directly. He could use that." "I know," Liam replied, calm in a way that was almost scary. "But I need to see his face. I need to hear him speak. I need to understand why." Silence for a moment, then Victor let out a breath. "I'll prepare everything, but boss, please be careful." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay on the soft bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow, thinking about Liam facing the brother who wanted him dead, thinking about what could happen, thinking that she might never see him again. A gentle knock pulled her out of her thoughts. She sat up, slipped on a thin robe, and opened the door. Liam stood there in the hallway darkness, still dressed in regular clothes, even though it was close to midnight. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice soft. Emma stepped back to let him enter. She closed the door behind him and turned to face him. Liam stood in the middle of the room, looking lost and alone, even inside his own home. "If tomorrow I don't come back," he began. "Don't say that," Emma cut in, moving closer. "Don't talk like you won't return." "Emma," Liam took her hand and held it tight. "I have to say it. If I don't come back, Victor will take care of you. Money, a new apartment, wiping out all your debt." "It's all arranged. I know you don't need it," he interrupted gently. "I know you didn't save me for those things." "But I want you to have them. I want to know that no matter what happens, you'll be all right. It's the only thing I can do for you." Emma felt tears rising, even as she tried to hold them back. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since Marcus died. But now, standing in front of this man, a man she had only known for 4 days and who had already changed her life completely, she felt her armor crack. Liam lifted his hand and touched her cheek, his thumb wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You're the best thing that's happened to me," he said, his voice rough. "In a long time, maybe in my whole life." "You've only known me 4 days," Emma whispered. "Long enough to know," Liam said, "long enough to know you're special. Long enough to know I don't want to lose you. Long enough to know." He didn't finish. Instead, he leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Emma didn't. She stood still and looked up at him, and when his mouth met hers, she closed her eyes. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, like a promise, like a question. Emma kissed him back, even though she knew this was insane. Even though she knew she was sinking into something more dangerous than guns and gangs. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under her palm. And she knew he was afraid too. When they pulled apart, forehead to forehead, breath tangled together, Emma whispered, "Come back. I want you to come back. I'll try," Liam answered, his voice broken. "I promise I'll try with everything I have." He kissed her forehead once more, then stepped back and let her hand go. "Sleep. Tomorrow will be long." Then he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Emma stood there for a long time, her lips still warm from the kiss. Then she went to the window. She looked down into the yard and saw Liam step out the front door and get into the car with Victor. The headlights came on, and the black SUV slid along the drive toward the gate. Emma stood at the window, watching the lights grow smaller, smaller, until they disappeared completely into the dark. And she prayed, for the first time in years, prayed for him to come back. The warehouse sat in the industrial area on the east side of the city. An old building with a rusted tin roof and heavy metal doors. The irony of life, Liam thought as he stepped inside. It started in a warehouse, and it might end in a warehouse too. The space inside was huge and hollow, with only a few old boxes stacked on top of one another, and steel columns holding up the roof. The air was thick with the smell of machine oil and dust, weak light filtering through dirty windows high above. Nathan had arrived first. His younger brother stood in the middle of the warehouse, hands in his pockets. Expression calm, like this were nothing more than an ordinary meeting between brothers. 4 bodyguards stood behind him. And Liam knew there were more hidden somewhere in the shadows. Victor and 3 of Liam's men followed him in, hands resting on their guns, ready for anything. The 2 groups stopped about 10 meters apart, close enough to talk, far enough to react if something happened. Liam looked at his brother, at the familiar face that now seemed strangely foreign. 32 years, he had known this boy since he was a red-faced newborn in their mother's hands. He had taught him to ride a bike, had fought the kids who bullied him at school, had shielded him from their father's rage, and now that boy wanted him dead. "You're alive?" Nathan spoke first, his tone gentle and calm. "What a surprise, disappointed," Liam asked. "A little," Nathan admitted, a cold smile touching his mouth. "I was hoping Turner would be more efficient. But it's fine. Things can still be fixed." Silence stretched out. Liam stared at his brother, searching for any sign of the boy he had once loved. But he saw only coldness and hate. "What do you want, Nathan?" he asked at last, his voice more tired than angry. "Power, money, the group. Tell me what you want." Nathan didn't answer right away. "I'll give it to you." Liam went on. "If that's all you need, you want to be in charge, fine. You want money, I'll split it with you. You want me gone, I'll disappear, go somewhere far away and never come back. Just tell me what you want." Nathan laughed, a laugh that was bitter and aching. "You think this is about money, about power?" He shook his head. "You still don't understand anything, Liam. After all these years, you still don't understand. Then explain it to me. This is about 32 years, brother." Nathan's voice changed suddenly from cold to something loaded with trapped emotion. 32 years where father only saw you. 32 years where I was a shadow, the one behind you. The one always introduced as Liam Dante's brother instead of by my own name. He stepped forward, eyes identical to Liam's, but burning with a different fire. "Do you know what father said to me before he died?" Liam stayed silent. "He called me to his bedside. I thought finally he'll say something to me. A word of love, a word of pride, anything." Nathan gave a harsh little laugh. "Do you know what he said? He said, 'Be loyal to your brother, that's it, not I love you, not I'm proud of you. Just be loyal to Liam. Even in the last minute, I was nothing but your accessory.'" Liam felt like someone had punched him in the chest. He hadn't known. He had never asked what their father had said to Nathan before he died. He had assumed their father loved them both equally and simply didn't know how to show it. "I just wanted him to look at me once," Nathan went on, his voice catching. "Just once, the way he looked at you. With pride, with expectation, with love, but he never did, and you never saw it either. You were too busy being the hero, too busy being loved, too busy to notice the little brother dying slowly in your shadow." A heavy silence settled over the warehouse. Liam opened his mouth, but no sound came. Finally, he whispered, "I didn't know, Nathan. I'm sorry, sorry." Nathan gave a thin laugh. "You're sorry? I thought I was protecting you." Liam said, "I thought I was doing the right thing. But maybe," Liam swallowed, "maybe I was only blinding myself. Maybe I didn't want to see the truth because it hurt too much." "Too late, brother," Nathan replied, his voice turning cold again. 32 years too late. Then he lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. Liam heard movement from everywhere, the scrape of metal, footsteps, the hard clicks of guns being readied. From above, from behind the boxes, from side doors, dozens of gunmen appeared, all pointing weapons at him and his men. Turner's people, this was a trap. Victor drew his weapon instantly. Liam's men did too, but they were completely outnumbered. Liam stood still, looking at his brother with eyes full of pain. "You thought I came here to talk?" Nathan asked, the cold smile returning. "I came here to finish what should have been finished a long time ago. Everything happened in an instant." Victor reacted before the first shot even cracked. He lunged for Liam, shoved him down, and dragged him rolling behind a large box just as bullets started to fly. Gunfire exploded through the warehouse like thunder. deafening and chaotic. Liam crouched behind the box, hearing rounds slam into wood and metal all around him. Victor had already drawn his weapon, returning fire with shocking accuracy. One of Turner's men up high dropped. Then another on the left, then a third from behind a steel column. 3 shots, 3 lives. 16 years at Liam's side had never been about being an ordinary bodyguard. Liam's men were fighting too. They were fewer in number but better trained, more disciplined, and they had the advantage of men who had prepared for the possibility that this was a trap. Shots cracked from every direction. The sharp smell of gunpowder thickened the air, and the screams of the wounded rose and fell into a violent, chaotic symphony. Liam refused to stay down. He grabbed a spare pistol from Victor's belt, surged out of cover, and dropped a man who was about to circle in from behind. The wound in his stomach still wasn't fully healed, every movement tearing pain through him, but he didn't stop. A bullet grazed his shoulder, ripping cloth and leaving a fresh red line, but he only clenched his teeth and kept moving. The fight probably lasted only minutes, but to Liam it felt endless. Every second was a battle to survive. Every shot could be the last, but slowly Turner's side began to break. They lost coordination, lost command. When Victor took down their leader, and finally the ones still alive began to run or surrender, when the last gunshot faded, Liam stood in the middle of the warehouse. Smoke hanging in the air, bodies on the floor, and across from him, only a few meters away, Nathan stood there with a gun aimed straight at Liam's chest. And no one else between them. Victor was behind, busy dealing with the remaining Turner men. Liam's people were securing the scene. It was only the 2 brothers now, facing each other the way they should have from the start. "It's over, big brother," Nathan said, his voice shaking even as he tried to sound calm. The gun in his hand was pointed straight at Liam's heart. "One bullet, just one, and it all ends." Liam looked at his brother, at the hands that shook, at the eyes full of pain, at the face of the child he had once held, soothed through nightmares, promised to protect forever. He didn't dodge, he didn't run, he didn't raise his own gun. "Shoot, Nathan," he said, his voice gentle and sad. "If that's what you need to be free, then shoot." Nathan showed his teeth, finger tightening on the trigger. But the bullet didn't come. 1 second, 2, 3. The gun stayed aimed at Liam, but Nathan couldn't pull the trigger. His hands shook harder, his whole body trembling like it was about to fall apart. "Why," Nathan screamed, his voice breaking with pain. "Why can't I? I hate you. I've hated you for 32 years. Why can't I shoot?" A gunshot rang out. But not from Nathan. Victor behind him fired the gun out of Nathan's hand, sending it skittering away and leaving Nathan's hand bleeding. Nathan dropped to his knees, not from the wound, but from something inside him giving way. He knelt on the cold concrete, and for the first time in his life, Liam saw his brother cry. Not silent tears, but broken sobbing. The raw sound of a man who had carried too much hate for too long. "I hate you," Nathan whispered between choking breaths. "But I can't kill you. I want to. I want you dead. But I can't do it with my own hands. I'm a failure." Even at hating, "I'm a failure," Liam walked over and knelt in front of him. He didn't speak. He only set a hand on Nathan's shoulder. A gesture he had done 100 times when they were younger, when Nathan woke from nightmares or took their father's blows. Nathan didn't knock his hand away. He only stayed there crying like the child he had been. Victor came up, snapped handcuffs around Nathan's wrists, and pulled him to his feet. He looked at Liam, waiting for the order. "Lock him up," Liam said, his voice tired but steady. "Don't hurt him." Victor hesitated. "Boss, he tried to kill you. He betrayed us to Turner, by our law. I know what our law is." Liam cut in. He stood and looked at his brother one last time before Nathan was led away. "But he's still my brother." Nathan turned his head back, staring at Liam with eyes red and confused. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he never would. But it didn't matter. Liam stood in a warehouse filled with bodies and empty shell casings. His shoulder bleeding, his heart breaking, and he knew only one thing. He couldn't kill his brother, no matter how many times Nathan tried to kill him. Emma had stood by the window all morning, staring down the drive that led into the estate with her heart clenched tight. She had no idea what was happening at that warehouse, no idea whether Liam was safe, no idea if he was even alive. Every minute passed like an hour, every hour like a day, and then around 3 in the afternoon, she heard the sound of an engine. Emma ran out of her room, ran down the stairs, crossed the grand entrance hall, and threw open the front door. The black SUV was parked in the courtyard, and Liam was stepping out. He was alive. His shoulder was bandaged, his shirt smeared with dried blood, his face drawn and hollow with being tired. But he was standing. He was walking, and he was looking at her with those gray eyes she had missed all morning. Emma ran to him without thinking, without hesitating. She crashed into his arms and held him tight, like she was afraid he would disappear if she let go. She didn't say anything. She just held him, feeling the heat of his body, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the fabric. "You're back," she whispered against his chest, her voice thick. "I promised," Liam answered, wrapping his arms around her and tightening his hold. They stood like that for a long moment in the pale gold afternoon light, needing no words, no explanations. Just knowing the other was still here was enough. Later, in the estate living room, Liam told her everything. About facing Nathan, about what his brother had said, about the gunfight, about the moment Nathan couldn't pull the trigger. Turner had been taken out, his group broken apart. Nathan was being held in a secure place. Not a prison, but not freedom either. The threat was over. Emma was safe. "You can go home now," Liam said, his voice gentle, but carrying something painful underneath. "Sullivan is gone. Nathan is locked away. No one will come for you anymore. You're safe." He looked at her. Gray eyes holding back too much. "I'll keep my promise. Money. A new apartment in a safer area. Clearing the entire $47,000 of debt. You can start over. A new life, clean, without me in it." He paused and swallowed. "I won't keep you." "I don't have the right to keep you." Emma stood there looking at him and felt her heart split in two. One part of her wanted to run back to a normal life, back to safety, back to what was familiar. She could have a new apartment, no debt, a real chance to start over with everything she needed. It was a dream she hadn't even dared to dream a week ago. But the other part of her, the part she had tried to ignore for 5 days, that part didn't want to leave. That part wanted to stay with this man, even if he was dangerous, even if his world was full of darkness, even if she knew this might be the most reckless decision of her life. Silence stretched out. Liam waited. Not pushing, not begging. He just stood there and looked at her with eyes that would accept whatever she chose. "I don't know what the future looks like," Emma said at last, her voice small but steady. "I don't know if this is crazy. I don't know if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life." She stepped closer and placed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat moving faster than normal under her palm. "But I want to stay, at least for now, at least until I know for sure what I want." Liam looked at her, surprise and hope flooding his eyes. "Are you sure? My world is dangerous, Emma. I'm dangerous. You've seen that." "I know. Then why would you stay with someone like me?" Emma smiled, sad but honest, because Marcus wasn't sure either when he ran into that burning car. He didn't know if he could save anyone, didn't know if he would survive, but he ran in anyway. She lifted her eyes to Liam. "Sometimes you have to do something reckless. Sometimes the reckless thing is the right thing, and sometimes the people worth risking everything for show up in the places you least expect." Liam didn't speak. He only lifted his hand, tipped her chin up, and kissed her. This kiss was different from last night. No hesitation, no fear of tomorrow. It was deeper, surer, like a promise, like a beginning. When they parted, Liam pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, "One more week." Emma laughed, truly laughed for the first time since it all began. One more week, but they both knew it would be more than a week. "Much more. Oh, and one more thing," Liam said, stepping back but still holding her hand. "Your landlady, Mrs. Chen, I've arranged a new apartment for her in a safer neighborhood, far from anywhere Turner knew. 2 years of rent paid up front. Emma looked at him and couldn't speak. She thought of the older woman who hadn't asked questions when Emma dragged a blood-covered man up the stairs, who had lied to protect her when Turner's men came asking. Mrs. Chen deserved safety, and Liam had handled it without Emma having to beg. This was who he really was, Emma realized, cold and ruthless with enemies, grateful and protective with good people. 2 sides of the same coin, and she was learning how to accept them both. They stood together by the window, looking out over the city of Los Angeles spread in front of them. The afternoon light was fading, and the first lights were beginning to glitter in the sunset. A city full of danger, full of uncertainty, but also full of possibility. Emma didn't know what the future would be. She didn't know if she was making the right decision. But for the first time in a long time, since Marcus died, since she had started living only to survive instead of truly living, she felt something like hope. And when Liam tightened his grip on her hand, she realized something else too. For the first time in many years, neither of them was alone anymore. And that was how one small act of courage changed everything for both Emma and Liam. This story reminds us that sometimes the wildest moments bring the most unexpected miracles. That kindness is never meaningless, no matter who we give it to. That every person has 2 sides, and loving someone means accepting both the light and the darkness in them. That family is not always blood, but sometimes the people we choose to stand beside. And that loneliness can be healed when we dare to open our hearts to the right person, even when they come from a world completely unfamiliar.